Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank you all for joining us for tonight's meeting, especially those who are here with us and those who are following us online as well. And we'll start out here with a bit of introductions. My name is Deb Angus. I'm the founder of this group. We started in November 2016, and I'm a brain injury survivor warrior of 18 years, almost 19 years now. And I'm also author of this book. And I wrote and researched that book over a 10-year period while I was also recovering and working full-time. And the co-founder, we have here that helps us in the background is Josie. I met her in 2016 and she was instrumental in helping me getting this group going. So we have a lot to thank her for. And she still advises us in the background. And tonight we have a guest speaker coming up, but first we'll go over a medical disclaimer before we get started. The information presented this evening is not intended or implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All content, including text, graphics, images, and information contained within this presentation is for general informational purposes only. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking medical attention because of something that was said or alluded to in this presentation. And our guest speaker this evening is Val Kowal, and she's here to talk to us about optimizing the HPA axis. This is part 3 of a 3-part series she presented to our group. If you did miss parts 1 and 2, you can still catch those presentation videos on our Facebook page under the Videos tab or on our YouTube channel. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce you to Val Kowal. Thank you.
Okay, so today's on optimizing the HPA axis. Okay, interrupt me if you have questions during the thing, or you can wait till the end, whatever you prefer. I'm okay either way. So, to quick review, what is the HPA axis? It's your central stress response system. This system is preserved in all animals, including snails and bugs and other mammals. So it is critically important for life, really. As you know, as we've talked about, it's a complex set of direct influences as well as feedback mechanisms. So it intertwines the functions of the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal glands. It controls your reactions to stress and regulates many of the body processes, including the immune system, digestion, emotions, sexuality, mood, etc., etc. Causes of HPA axis dysfunction from part 2. Physical injury, we talked about the sphenoid bone and the alignment of the sphenoid bone. Psychological stress and trauma, this is a really serious cause of it, very common. Gut-brain axis dysfunction, often negated and often not considered, but plays a very, very important role, and people with autoimmunity know this very well. Inflammation and genetics and epigenetics. Genes can get turned on and off as a result of a brain injury, and that can affect how you heal from the brain injury.
So you're saying the gut-brain axis dysfunction, is that like the microbiome, the gut health that they've been talking about?
The gut lining?
The last 20 years?
Yeah, the gut lining, the microbiome, the whole thing.
How to optimize it, like with probiotics, that's just such a big thing.
If you have a leaky gut, I generally don't recommend a probiotic right away. You need to seal it off, because your healthy microbiome in your gut can actually infect other areas of your body that have a different microbiome.
Because of the leaky gut.
Yes.
So it's more about the leaky gut.
Yes, you got to heal the lining of the gut.
Okay.
Leaky gut, leaky brain.
Yeah.
Okay, this is one of the common sayings as well. And so when those toxins and things like that get through the leaky gut into the bloodstream, that can enter into the brain. Brain fog is not an uncommon thing with a brain injury. Mm-hmm. And it can be very connected to the gut-brain axis dysfunction. Okay. This is, I see very common in autoimmune patients. Yeah. And I myself have an autoimmune disorder and have experienced the brain fog from eating things I'm not supposed to.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah. So today we are talking about optimizing it. In order to optimize it, you need to understand whether you have an HPA axis dysfunction or not. And we measure that by looking at 2 hormones, DHEA and cortisol. DHEA is one of the most abundant hormones in the body, and it's a precursor for all your sex steroids. So estrogen, testosterone, all of those. Very, very important. So the adrenal glands produce it, but so do the gonads, so does your skin, so does your brain. It is, as I said, a metabolic intermediate in the production of testosterone and estrogen. It also acts as a neurosteroid and a modulator of neurotrophic factors, so it acts in the brain. It acts on neurons, it acts on brain cells. And it has a very important role in healing from brain trauma. It also has important functions in the central nervous system, and it balances some of the negative effects of cortisol, particularly if the cortisol is high. It's an antagonist of it. Cortisol is your body's main stress hormone. You cannot live without it. If your adrenals fail, you're supplementing cortisol. Okay, you absolutely need cortisol to live. It, like DHEA, it follows a daily diurnal rhythm. And so cortisol should be highest in the morning. And then it gradually drops over the day. So what happens with a brain injury sometimes is insomnia. And what's related to that is sometimes you get that cortisol rise at night or late in the evening, and that's going to affect your ability to sleep. It is one of the hormones that will maintain a fight or flight response. Okay. It helps maintain fluid balance and regulate blood pressure. Okay. Yes?
So are you going back to just your use of the word insomnia?
Yes.
So like, I'm just trying to think, because I know, like, is there any, like, I should have had, I believe they did a full panel, but insomnia is one of my worst symptoms.
I'm sorry?
Like, I'll go maybe 30 minutes of like real sleep a week,
Okay.
and that's with many drugs. So when we're looking at the cortisol though, so I know things like trazodone and zopiclone working on GABA, other neuroreceptors, are they going to negatively impact that though in the long run?
I do believe they do, because what happens is they can become habit forming, where you become dependent on them for sleep. Okay? And so one of the things we need to remember is that we need to deal with the underlying mechanism that's leading to the insomnia. So what is that mechanism going on there, right? And so the trazodone, the zopiclone, things like that, they will help you sleep. They're sedatives. Okay, just like caffeine, for instance, is going to give you energy when you take it, right? Or if you drink coffee to get going in the morning. But it's almost like an artificial stimulant, caffeine, and so it's like an artificial sleep in a way. It's not allowing that natural process to occur in the body.
I definitely do feel like when I'm up at like 400 milligrams of the trazodone, when I'm at, talking up at like 30 milligrams of zopiclone, and I get it intensely, it is not restful. I'm
Yes.
probably,
It's a
the
fake
next
sleep.
day, I'm
Yeah.
probably at my most irritability, because then I have like through the sleep apps and stuff, I was out for 14 hours.
Yeah.
But you look at restlessness and just my overall, not very difficult.
Yeah.
But it is, they don't seem to do much for me. And I guess I'm just asking because I keep going back to my doctor, and it's like, test this.
Yeah.
Because if I don't, they just keep giving me more drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
You have to remember is they work in a certain context, right? And they have a certain view of things. They don't always connect everything. Like it may be a referral to an endocrinologist might be advisable.
I think I went to Summers and I saw like 6 different doctors. And the fact is, it's like I am so spread out.
Yeah.
They just said, well, we can't help you.
Yeah.
Because I don't have, I'm not falling into that one standard. But at the same time, like I mentioned in church, like that week could trace back, I have 22 concussions.
Yeah.
Oh my.
From military, sports,
Blast
other
injury.
things.
Yeah.
I was in artillery, so.
Yeah.
Oh
And
gosh.
and then a recent assault where being a healthcare worker and that's, finally the first time I've actually heard of PCS.
Yeah.
But with all of those and that history, they don't know where to put me. So doctors are just
Yeah.
wiping their hands clean.
We have to start with your HPA axis. It's very evident that there is a dysfunction going on there. That's where I would start. Because all of those other symptoms are probably connected to that in one way or another.
When I I started looking at when the doctor said, even because the psychologist said, oh, it's depression or it's
Yep,
PTSD.
yep.
And it's not concussion related. So of course I started using research and looking at stuff, and it's like hypothyroidism.
Yep,
But then they look at my KSH, and it's like, no, you're fine.
yep.
But it just, so everything is just like kind of at the loss where kind of my post the other day, and it was just so.
That's your
but, yeah,
HPA
it's
axis.
like-
All those symptoms that seem seemingly unrelated, like a lot of you have experienced, it all goes back to that one thing. This is central to everything, okay? It regulates pretty much every function in the body, directly or indirectly, okay? Okay, so helps maintain fluid balance and regulates blood pressure. So after head injury, sometimes blood pressure issues arise. Okay, and that relates often to this, the dysfunction and how the cortisol's secreted. Manages how your body uses macronutrients, so carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Cortisol likes to raise blood sugar, and so blood sugar regulation issues can be common after brain injuries as well. Diabetes, okay? It can help decrease inflammation, but it can also help increase inflammation. It's a matter of how it's balanced. And it also is very much affected by, very much influences how the immune system is functioning. Okay? Sleep-wake cycle, this is your circadian rhythm, okay? Just what we've been talking about, okay? It also boosts energy, so you ever hear those stories of women who, a car's falling on their child and they lift it and throw it off? This plays a role in that as well as adrenaline, okay? So it'll maintain it. So your adrenaline is going to stimulate the fight or flight response, cortisol is going to maintain it. And then it's going to shut it down through feedback mechanisms to the hypothalamus and pituitary. So when we measured HPA axis dysfunction, we're actually looking at a ratio between cortisol and DHEA. Okay? Both of these hormones are derived from progesterone.
What? Really?
Okay? And so when the body is under stress, it'll actually prioritize cortisol over DHEA formation. And so oftentimes with head injuries, it's not uncommon to see testosterone get lower, estrogen imbalances, estrogen dominance becomes quite common, okay? And so that plays a role in things like breast cancer, okay, estrogen dominance, right? And we often see, so again, it doesn't necessarily need the brain injury in order to develop the HPA axis dysfunction, okay? But because this group is a brain injury, that's how we're focusing here. So stage 1, there's 4 stages. Oh, there's actually 7 stages, but to simplify it, stage 1, you have high cortisol, and your DHEA is reasonably high, okay? This, you might just feel tired. You may not recover quite as much from exercise, or you just don't have the stamina that you used to. Your focus might be a little bit off, etc. High cortisol and low DHEA is what we see in the second phase, and this is when we start seeing hormone imbalances, okay, in addition to stages and symptoms of the first stage. Stage 3, low cortisol and low DHEA. I've been in this. This is not fun. You can't get out of bed. Okay? It's brutal. You have no appetite. You're gaining weight. You're very, very depressed. Okay? And it's actually showing more and more now that cortisol DHEA imbalances, HPA axis dysfunction is actually quite common in depression and anxiety disorders.
And that's the reason to get to the root of the issue, not
Yes.
medicating.
Exactly.
State,
Yeah.
sorry, so I could theoretically go to my doctor and say, hey, I want a cortisol DHA ratio saliva test. And then when it comes back, if it's one thing or another, do you go and get the DHA supplement or?
Well, the problem with the way they test it in the West is that they took a blood test, and it's only at one time point.
Right.
Okay? To truly study it, you have to look at least 4, better even
Sure.
5 time points.
Through the day.
Yes. Okay? So morning, noon, evening, night. And waking cortisol response is really important as well. Okay? And through that you actually see the curve, and you actually see the relationship between the DHEA and cortisol. Okay? Stage 4 is adrenal failure. You're on adrenal supplements for that. Stage 4 is typically what we see with Addison's disease. It's an autoimmune disorder that JFK actually had Addison's disease. Okay. Oop, wrong way. So this is a diagram of DHEA cortisol ratio. And so you can see stage 1, so normal, there's actually pretty close, right? But stage 1, you see this high, low. But it's not too low, right, compared to normal. As you get to stage 2, this ratio starts decreasing because the cortisol is coming down, stage 3, and then stage 4, they're both very low. In the more complex things, as things get even worse, what you see is DHEA go up and cortisol drop. And those don't last for very long. Those are very, very severe stages of HPA axis dysfunction. Okay. So to review causes of HPA axis dysfunction: injury, stress and trauma, gut-brain dysfunction, inflammation, genetics and epigenetics. How do we optimize it? Acupuncture and acupressure. I'm an acupuncturist. I do a lot of this. There are a lot of studies, and I tend to peruse the medical journals a lot. Functional MRI studies that actually show a direct correlation with acupuncture points and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. It lights it right up.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I've been quite curious. Do we have access to functional MRIs here in Calgary?
I don't think we do.
I don't think we do either.
I don't think we
Yeah.
do here. They're very expensive, and a
Yeah.
lot of times they're used in studies.
Yes,
As
and
opposed
research,
to, as
yeah.
opposed to clinical.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in terms of the studies,
Yeah.
they actually show a direct correlation. And the points aren't on the head. Very few of them are actually on the head. Most of them are on the body, which is really surprising. Okay. Acupuncture can be used to treat both physical injuries and the emotional and psychological trauma. Okay? We can use acupuncture to align the sphenoid bone. We can use it to deal with emotional and psychological injuries, psychological trauma. I've worked with extreme PTSD, and it's worked quite effectively. It affects the gut-brain axis. Acupuncture is about rebalancing things, and the needles will help the body rebalance things as it's needed. We have to go slowly, though, okay? Because if we push too far, the treatments can be way too strong and do the opposite effect. It has anti-inflammatory effects, and there's many studies that support this. Okay, whether it's treating knee osteoarthritis or low back pain or even headaches, it works very, very well. It also has global epigenetic effects. I read one study that the point on the hand here, between the thumb and index finger, a point that is commonly used for headaches, can affect over 800 genes. Just needling that one.
Wow.
Okay, so you can affect epigenetics with acupuncture. Okay. And it's very gentle, by the way. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Herbal therapies are another route. And I'm not giving a lot of specifics because when we do herbal therapies, it's very specific to you and what your pattern is. That's the way we do things in Chinese medicine. But I'll tell you some things that I found some in the studies. There are many herbs that will work on the HPA axis. Okay, one of my favorites is cordyceps. It's a mushroom that grows up in the Himalayas. It's very expensive if you get the wild stuff, but it's now fortunately cultivated. You want the water and alcohol extract of cordyceps. And when I go into adrenal fatigue, that's my go-to for me. My feet get very sore when my HPA axis is getting out of balance. Within 3 days, cordyceps will take that away. Okay. Other herbs, turmeric. Good old standby turmeric. Turmeric has been shown to affect the expression of numerous genes, both on an epigenetic level, something called, I was mentioning to Deb earlier, something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which actually helps increase the number of neurons and neuronal connections in the brain before and after injury. It helps with neuroplasticity, not just in the child's brain, but in the adult brain. And as we get older, we tend to produce less of this stuff. Turmeric increases the expression of the gene that produces that. It is also a very potent anti-inflammatory. I've used it for patients with brain fog, that develops from some other genetic disorders. It works extraordinarily well. It also helps your brain cells take up potassium, okay? Which helps with nerve conduction. It's one of the electrolytes, right? Avoid stimulant herbs, caffeine, and numerous other stimulant herbs. It's like beating a dead horse,
So like
okay?
peppermint?
Sorry?
Something like peppermint?
Peppermint isn't a stimulant in that way.
Okay.
It's not going to artificially increase that energy and make you more exhausted as a result.
Oh, got it.
But things like some of the bodybuilding herbs that are often used, ephedra,
Right.
and things like that, ephedrine, that kind of stuff, are stimulants, and they actually increase the HPA axis dysfunction. If you do take herbs, it's really important to work with somebody who knows them, especially when you're working with the HPA axis. A lot of adaptogenic herbs work on the HPA axis, but if you have autoimmunity, some of those adaptogenic herbs are not going to be good for you because they will trigger inflammation. Okay? So it's really important to understand the herb-drug interactions, but also herb-condition interactions. Okay? Some herbs, if you have a lot of cold in your system, you're not going to take a cold herb. You want something warm. And so this is sort of how we work in Chinese medicine. Okay? Some of the formulas I use in Chinese medicine are kidney tonics. They work on the HPA axis. And they do work quite well. But it is important, again, to know what your pattern is because they can actually exacerbate certain things if you're taking the wrong ones. All right? This is my favorite, and it's the most effective. And it's something you do every day, 3 to 6 times a day, and it is far more powerful than people realize. Food is extraordinarily powerful, and it can have a very profound effect on the HPA axis, both at negative and positive. If you have food sensitivities and you're eating those foods, you are draining your HPA axis and you're creating further imbalance. Okay? You're also damaging the gut, which then connects to the brain, which then connects to your HPA axis, et cetera, et cetera. But they can also be extraordinarily healing. Okay? I mentioned last time bone broth for healing the gut. It's also good for the brain. You can add herbs to that bone broth and other foods to that bone broth to make it even more brain healing. Okay? So consuming foods that provoke sensitivity or inflammatory reactions will exacerbate the dysfunction. So an elimination diet can be very helpful to understand what foods may be causing problems and which foods may be helpful for you. Okay? And I know Deb won't agree with this. My experience is, and having been vegetarian for 17 years before I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, everything I ate as a vegetarian I can't eat anymore. It all causes me inflammation. I had to add meat back to my diet. Even eggs and cheese I can't eat. Just fresh fruits and vegetables and meat. That's my diet.
Do you find within your patients and stuff that possibly like if you look at their cravings and their stuff will kind of lead to where they are? Like for example, I think, I don't know, there's a lot more like sometimes it's really fatty foods I'm just craving that, but then there's days where it's like I only want vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
Like is that kind of like a way to kind of track that?
Yeah, that's part of what I look at, for sure. Yeah, because that tells us part of the pattern, okay? In Chinese medicine, we diagnose patterns, we don't diagnose conditions, okay? So we're looking at your pattern. And so if you're constantly craving, say, fatty foods, then we're going to look at certain things. It's kind of pinpointing in certain areas. Now, with a brain injury, actually increasing good quality fats in the diet and increasing proteins and reducing carbs a little bit is actually a good thing. Okay? Your cell membranes in your brain are made from fats, and actually one of the best things I've used is something called brain octane. Brain octane is pure caprylic acid. Okay, it's derived from coconut oil, and it's a readily available source of ketones. They're converted to ketones very quickly, and your brain can do very well on ketones. Okay, if you have done any reading into Alzheimer's research, they actually call it type 3 diabetes in some circles. Okay, and so one of the things they're finding, and this is with also autoimmunity, is some carbs can actually cause problems with that. Doesn't mean to eliminate them completely. You don't have to go full ketogenic. But knowing how your body's reacting to certain carbohydrates and certain types of food is really, really important. Because if you are provoking inflammation, then you're actually making the condition worse. You're adding a stress, which is then triggering the HPA axis again. Okay? Make sense? So food's helpful to your condition, right? So by eliminating certain things, and what I usually recommend people eliminate, and you're going to have a flip over this one probably, my recommendations for elimination is all grain. Grains are a big problem for people, even gluten-free grains, okay? Dairy, eggs, nuts and seeds, beans and lentils, nightshade vegetables. So you're just stuck with fruit, vegetables, and meat in various forms. Yeah. And if you can follow that for 4 to 6 weeks, then you can probably start looking at adding certain things back slowly, one food at a time, and evaluating your reaction. If you react, then you eliminate it for longer. You haven't healed it. Okay? If you remember from last time, we talked about how the brain injury itself can actually trigger a gut injury. Okay? And so you have to heal that gut injury to help the brain. Okay? This is an important one, and a lot of people don't get this. So with exercise, we still try to push ourselves and push ourselves. With an exhausted HPA axis or imbalanced HPA axis, listen to your body. If you are exhausted and you crash for 3 days after a workout, you overdid it a little bit. Okay? If your recovery from exercise, so let's say you go to the gym and you are doing, say, lunges, and you wake up the next morning and it feels like your muscles are ripping off the bones of your legs, you overdid it. Okay? Your immune system plays a role in recovering from exercise. And so when your immune system is out of balance because of HPA axis dysregulation, then how you exercise and how long you exercise and the intensity of it, how you exercise, is actually going to be affected. And you need to listen to that. As your HPA axis gets more imbalanced, then you can increase the intensity, yes.
So does that mean if someone was a real heavy workout person before they had a brain injury, it might be different after that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so
Yeah.
they won't be able to pump it the way they did before?
Yeah, but you can create an HPA axis dysfunction by over-exercising.
Yeah.
It's very common in triathletes, marathoners. I mean, treating marathoners, their most common is where I see weak lung chi in the pulses, is in a marathoner. And you'd think that with all their running, their lungs would be really strong. But they always show a deep pulse on the lungs. I always wondered why. And it's overuse. Yeah, so moderate. So in terms of HPA axis dysfunction, the best exercise is walking. Very gentle, stretching. Okay, nothing really intense. And the really interesting thing is exercise actually helps boost that brain-derived neurotrophic factor too. The brain swims in it. So movement is really, really important. It doesn't have to be intense. It doesn't have to be long. It could be short bursts of it. If you want to do something a little more intense, high intensity intervals could be something if you're strong enough and you aren't so out of balance. Or it could just simply be, I'm going to sit and stretch today. That could be the movement you do. Or walking. Okay? Yoga class, Tai Chi, Qigong, those kinds of things. And they work systemically through the whole body. Qigong and Tai Chi actually work through the meridian system, much like acupuncture does. To consider with HPA axis dysfunction is it often correlates with a condition called sympathetic dominance. Okay? So the sympathetic aspect of the nervous system becomes dominant, which means the parasympathetic becomes weaker. And Deb's mentioned a number of times, she did a presentation a while back on the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the largest nerve and most important nerve in the parasympathetic nervous system. It's your rest and repose or rest and relax nervous system. And so it's really important to build tone in that nervous system. And many of the things that build tone for the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system will actually help rebalance the HPA axis. Surprisingly, deep breathing, yawning, humming, gargling, intense gargling if you can get your head back, if it's not going to cause dizziness, but intense gargling. Acupuncture, we can work on vagus nerve. All of these things, meditation, prayer, all of these things play a role in in helping to restore that balance. We live in a society that our bodies are not designed for. We're constantly stimulated, we're constantly working, we're constantly worried. Your body responds no matter what the source of the stress is in exactly the same way. It's not meant to be constantly activated, okay? So it's important to find a way to disconnect from all of those things and give yourself that space just simply to be a human being.
And how I explained it here often, a lot of times, is that society is so frenetic, it has us up here, and we're like this all the time, go, 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 go. And our goal now is living with brain injury, is to bring it down 1,000 notches and learn to live a different way, our new way of being, with the meditation and the yoga and the deep breathing and lots of quiet time and lots of rest. And you do easily get out of that a lot of times when stuff happens. And you get back here and you go, oh, how did that happen? I want it back here again.
The other important thing is disconnect from your electronics.
Yes.
Do not sleep with them in your bedroom. If you have a TV in your bedroom, get it out of your bedroom,
No.
okay? That should be an area that's clean of all that magnetic radiation. Now, if you do, like if you're living in an apartment building or whatever and you can't get away from it, there is a stone called shungite. And you see this talked a lot about. It's actually very good for blocking EMFs.
Yeah.
Very, very good for
I
blocking.
have 4 pieces throughout my apartment.
Yeah, yeah. And so it is a very good thing. SHUNGITE. You want the one from Russia.
Where does one find these?
Earth Gems.
Earth Gems on 17th Avenue. Yeah. Yeah.
We
So,
can do a tour someday if you want.
yeah, except they got all the incense in there, right?
It doesn't bother me.
No?
No.
The other thing to consider if you're not allergic is essential oils. Okay? Lemon balm is actually a very good essential oil for the HPA axis.
Also called Melissa.
Okay. You know, for evenings, difficulty sleeping, you could use something called, we can use Roman chamomile. Not German, but Roman chamomile. It works more on the HPA axis. And lavender can be very helpful as well. So if you're using it directly on yourself, dilute it. All essential oils should be diluted until you know what your sensitivities are. Some, like lavender, don't necessarily have to be, but it's always good to start with a dilution. Okay. Frankincense is another one that's very good. And it can be combined with other things. Black spruce is another one that's very, very good that works on the HPA axis. So there's quite a few of those that do as well. And you can just put it on your hands and smell it so your body's absorbing it, or put it on a tissue, or put it in a diffuser. Stick it in a pot on the stove that's steaming. Some of them, like lavender, you can even make into a tea and drink it.
And I like a mister as well too.
Yeah.
Mix it with distilled water
Yeah.
and a few drops and mist it around.
Yeah. Or you can mix it with vodka.
No, we do not recommend alcohol.
Not to drink it. So to summarize, HPA axis dysfunction is very common today, okay? And you don't have to have a brain injury to have it. But for those with the brain injury, it can be a very debilitating thing because it is often something that is missed and not considered. You need to do a multi-pronged approach. So just one thing is not always going to be enough to restore balance. So if you're having a bad diet and doing acupuncture, acupressure, it'll help to a degree, but then you're limiting the effect of it by not coordinating your other behaviors to work with it. Avoid your stressors as much as possible and find stress management techniques that you can go to that work for you if you are confronted with a stressor. So if that means sitting down and meditating somewhere after you've been exposed to a loud noise or you've been kept awake or whatever, then do that. Okay. Or turning to your trusty bottle of essential oils. Keep one in your bag or in your wallet and pull it out when you have to smell it to calm yourself down. Actually, I do that in my clinic. I put lavender on a cotton ball with my stressed out patients and leave it beside them so they can smell it through the whole treatment. Be patient with your body. You add stress to your body by forcing it to do something it's not ready to do. So there's that element of acceptance that we all have to come to. We may not be able to do the things we used to. And that's okay, because you are where you are right now. And that's where you start. And lastly, and I've said this to many of my patients too, healing's not an event. Don't expect it to be an event. It is a journey. It is a journey where you get an opportunity to learn about yourself and appreciate yourself, the good, the bad, the ugly, the weird, the strange. You're lucky you get to experience that, because there's many people who walk through life completely blind. They never ever get to know who they are. When I was in my 20s, I went through a crash of my HPA axis, and it manifested in a very severe clinical depression. I hallucinated from all 5 senses in this depression. I was going nuts. They thought I had a brain tumor. And I was tested, sent for all kinds of brain scans. And it turned out, now that I understand what was going on, it turned out it was my HPA axis. And that came after 5 deaths in a 1-year period.
Wow.
Loss is a big factor in that. Okay? So knowing what I know now, it took me many years to understand it. Okay? And I've worked very hard on rebuilding it now that I understand it. But I'm still at a point, if I get too stressed, it tips the other way. And it'll tell me. And I can't fight it. I can try, but what's the point? I'm just going to make myself worse. So, because I'm worth it, I have to accept that journey. And I hope all of you do too. Okay? If there's any questions, ask away. I know we were asking away. Yeah, if you have any further questions, ask away. I know this is very generalized. I can't give really specifics. Okay? But if you wanted to look at one specific diet plan that I use for this, and I've used it myself, and I put my own autoimmune disorder in remission with it, among with other treatments, but something called autoimmune paleo, or AIP. It's probably one of the best elimination diets there is out there.
What was that called?
Autoimmune paleo. It's meat-based, with lots of fruit and vegetables.
I don't mind referring other people.
Yeah, I have found it to be very effective, and I've used it with a lot of patients. I've had at least 5 patients put their autoimmunity into remission with it. Yeah. So.
I just have one more quick question about DHEA.
Yep.
My mom had breast cancer 3 times, and
Yep.
one of the things that is guaranteed for me is that I am to never be on any hormone replacement
Yes.
therapy. Is DHEA considered in the
Yes.
same category? It is.
Yes, and if you've had a hormone-dependent cancer, DHEA is contraindicated. However, there are herbs that can indirectly affect your DHEA. One of them is cordyceps.
Yeah, no, I've got that
Yeah.
highlighted.
Cordyceps is my favorite herb
Right.
of all time.
How do you spell
comes
that?
close. Cordyceps?
Yeah.
CORDYCEPS.
Oh, yes, I've seen that one. Okay.
Yeah, is.
And so, but the one thing that would be important in balancing your HPA axis would be also considering your estrogen, like whether there's an estrogen dominant pattern there or not, which probably there is. And as women tend to go into menopause, a lot tend to be estrogen dominant. And that's why we see this increased risk for breast cancer in that menopausal age range between 40 and 60. Right? Yeah.
I'm paying for a contrast MRI. $1,100 next Friday
Wow.
because of the lumps. They just said, oh, we'll expedite you in because of them. 10 months is expedited. So I said, I'll just, a normal one would be 2 years.
That's
Yeah.
quite the price
So-
tag.
And
Oh, my
I'm not gonna wait, so that's why
No.
my question, so I apologize,
No.
it's not really bringing stuff, guys,
Yeah.
but thank you for
Yeah.
your patience on that.
Yeah, but we mean it ties in with that because I mean even for men, low testosterone, 50% drop in sperm counts in men now. That was the latest research that came out. It's massive.
Wow.
And again, testosterone levels, that all ties in with how your HPA axis is functioning. And so by rebalancing that HPA axis, you can actually re-stimulate testosterone production in the body for men. So I mean, so it's not just women who have those hormone imbalances, men certainly do too. And I mean, we're seeing it increasing with very, very concerning increases in frequency. Low testosterone in men. We have excess estrogen and low testosterone. So we have that opposite effect happening, right? And it could be because men have excess estrogen too. Right? Yeah.
Is this related to frontal lobe injuries at all?
I'm sorry?
Is that related to frontal lobe injuries at all?
Well, I think if you injure any area of the brain, it could affect those, because I mean, the hypothalamus and pituitary are in the center of the brain. And so that jarring is going to affect it. It depends on the nature of the
Because I
injury.
hear a lot of males have the frontal lobe injury and then they have a lot of their anger and rage related to that as well too.
Well, that has more to do with
Yeah.
personality.
Yeah.
That tends to map
So
to
the hormones
the
aren't coming
prefrontal
into
and
there.
frontal cortex of the brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, your emotional
Like if you think of,
regulation is right here.
yeah, you think of, years ago when they did lobotomies,
Yeah.
it totally changed the personalities, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why they did them, because that's where those centers are.
So is that all the questions? Well, thank you very much, Val, for coming and doing 3 talks for us. That's
Yeah, I
wonderful.
know. If you do want things more specific, let me know. It's just, unfortunately, I'm limited what I can give here, so. Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
So I'll turn the camera off now and we'll have our little sharing circle. And to give you a heads up for our meeting next month, we'll have another guest speaker joining us. Her name is Dr. Megan Haggerty of the Nardella Clinic, and her topic will be naturopathic medicine, concussions, and adrenal fatigue. We hope you're able to join us. And for those who are on Facebook, if you'd like to keep track of when our meetings will happen, it's the last Friday of every month from September till May. We take a break over the summer, but you can also go on our Facebook page and click the Events tab, and you'll see our meetings and topics listed there. Thank you. And for those who are interested in obtaining a copy of my book, it is available at several locations here in Calgary. At the University of Calgary Medical Bookstore at the Foothills Medical Center, the Mayfair Eye Clinic at the Rocky View Health Center, at the Calgary Public Library, and also here while you're attending our meetings. For those not in the Calgary area, you can place a mail order through sierranovapublishing.com. Thank you. And this is a new product I was working on over the summer. I designed a set of healing affirmation cards based on my book. They're not yet currently available to purchase through our website, but you can purchase them while you're here attending our meetings. And we thank you for watching our video presentations and for following us on Facebook and YouTube. We greatly appreciate your likes, comments, and shares, and for being part of our concussion awareness community. Thank you.